Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome back to another episode of Hands-On SAP Devs. We're going to start a multi-episode series here where we're going to look at how to build a modern HANA native application using the SAP HANA Cloud and the Cloud Application Programming Model and the latest in UI5 and Fiori tools as well. Now, a few weeks ago, I went through this new code sample that we have, the hana-opensap-cloud-2020 code sample. Showed you a little bit of the functionality that was in the application, walked through it a little bit from a high level, and of course it's shared, asked for feedback and further enhancement requests, that more things that people would like to see added to this example. But we've reached the point where we've got enough functionality in here. Yes, there are still some things out here that I'd like to add, but I think we want to go ahead and start showing how we built this entire solution. You know, it's one thing to look at the finished product and be able to study all the source code. It's a whole nother thing to be able to actually sit and watch someone build it from scratch, completely from the beginning. And that's what I'd like to do over multiple episodes here on this show is walk you through the process. We'll build the whole thing. We'll use the latest in development tooling. We'll primarily use the Business Application Studio. There's maybe just a couple parts where we'll go back to the Web IDE, where not all the HANA functionality is quite available yet, but you'll see just how much we can do here using the Business Application Studio. And keep in mind, as we've talked about in the past, most anything you can do in the Business Application Studio, you can also do in local development in VS Code. It was actually where I did the first pass of the development here, VS Code with HANA Express. Now we'll rebuild the whole thing using Business Application Studio and the HANA Cloud trial as well. Now, I don't want to walk you through the whole trial setup process and the whole HANA Cloud provisioning. I did a video on that a couple weeks ago, and I don't want to repeat, what took us like maybe 15-20 minutes to do in that previous video. I'll put a link to that previous video in the show notes of this video if you do need to refer back to that. But maybe just to recap a little bit of what we have done so far is, yes, I do have an SAP Cloud Platform trial account provisioned. If I look here, I actually cleaned up some stuff. You see, I don't really have any applications deployed. I only have the HANA Cloud trial and an ABAP trial created in here. I have no HDI containers, no other services. Let me look here at my user-provided services. Yeah, I have no user-provided services. So I've intentionally I cleaned up and deleted a lot of the stuff that I had out here, so it would be just like if you were starting from scratch with a pretty clean new version of trial. I have already provisioned my SAP HANA Cloud instance. We'll see it here in just a second. There it is. And it is running. Remember, if you're using the HANA Cloud trial each night to save in cost for unused systems, it does stop, which basically just puts the system to sleep. And you do have to come in each morning and restart it. And I've already restarted it for the day here as well. And if I open a Database Explorer window, I haven't done a whole lot on the system that I haven't backed out in order to do this video. But what I do have, if you've watched all the recent videos, you know that a couple weeks ago I went deeply into the subject of HDI admins and group admins. So I have some users set up there. But the main thing that we might be interested in that I have set up here is if I look at my schemas. Let's take that filter out. That was a tutorial I was working on the other day. But I have imported SFlight. And I did this in the Getting Started with the HANA Trial video as well. So if you need to see the steps, you can refer back to that video. But it was a very simple process of basically downloading the zip file from the SAP Samples GitHub repository and then just importing it into my system here. And we'll use that a little bit later to set up some cross-container, cross-schema access. So one of the more advanced techniques, but it's good because we'll use this S-Flight to basically simulate an ERP system or any non-HDI container that's been imported or replicated into our system. And the process that we'll go through to set up the security and the synonyms and everything will be the same. It doesn't matter that this is a demo S-Flight. The process to access it is all going to be the same. So actually, I deleted these other containers. They're still here in Database Explorer, but I had deleted them from the cockpit. So let me just go ahead while I'm in here and clean those up so there's no confusion. But at this point, I've got a pretty clean system, pretty much ready to go here. And the last thing I want to show you is if I come back here to my sub-account level, and we go to subscriptions. I did already activate the subscription for the Business Application Studio and do the little bit of security role configuration necessary to run it. That was also in the previous video where we showed the setup of the HANA Cloud trial. So I won't repeat that again. But what we will see is I'll do go to application. And you'll see I have no dev spaces. So once again, to start development, let's just go ahead and create a new dev space. Pardon me. And we are going to do cloud business application. So cloud CAP development, cloud application programming model. And when choosing this template dev space, you'll see that it will give us our basic UI5 tools in here. We'll also get some Fiori application tooling. But most important, we'll get the CDS tools. And we'll go ahead and add in, well, we're not going to do any workflow development or workzone development in this particular scenario, but I'm a developer. I like to have all the tools that I can possibly have. So I'll go ahead and add those to my space as well. Oh, I need to name it. So let's call this I can do underscores but not hyphens. So open SAP Cloud 2020. I'll name it the same as my GitHub repository. Not that you have to do that, but that will help me remember which workspace I created for this video series. So as I do other work for other deliverables, I won't accidentally use this this particular dev space, and I'll reserve it for just this video series. So let's go ahead and create that. That will take a few seconds to create and fully start, and then we'll be able to go in there. All right, our dev space is started. So we can go ahead and click on that to launch it. And we'll give it a moment here to finish installing everything. All right, there's our welcome screen. And you see here, organization space, Cloud Foundry have not been set. So let's go ahead and set that. That is my space. All right, that's my URL. We'll choose my trial. And I only have one space in the trial. So now I am targeting my trial organization in space. That's good. I'll have access to the right location. Now the other thing I want to do here is I want to go ahead and open a terminal. Let's see where we are. Okay, so we're in home user. Yes, and there's our projects folder. But a couple things I want to install and configure here first. First, let's do an npm config list. And yes, this still has the npm.sap.com. It's going to be changed shortly, but I want to go ahead and get rid of that. So npm config delete at SAP registry, and that's user config. Now, if we do an npm config list again, now that configuration is gone. So we'll be pointing to the public registry. That's good. And now I want to install a little utility here, the HANA client, the developer utility from the SAP samples. So that we can just do an npm install globally the HANA CLI. And that will take, oh, that'll take a moment to install, so we'll let that sit and do its thing. There we are, all finished, completely installed. I do a HANA CLI version. We'll see. Yes, I have the latest version installed. We can see some of the dependencies. So that looks like it's good to go. The other thing I'm going to check just real quick, I'm going to do a CDS version as well, just see what version of the of CDS is installed by default. 3.34.2. Now one thing we can do here is we can go npm.js.com and we can say at CDS at SAP CDS, and we can see the latest version is actually 3.34.3. So we're one minor release behind, probably not a problem, but we can see how we can upgrade things here as well. So we can do a npm install globally at SAP CDS DK for development kit, and let's let that install now, or in this case actually update. There we are, that's done. So if I redo that CDS version, now you see, well, the same CDS version, did I not, the development kit 185. So it went up from 185 to 186 on the development kit itself. So, you know, one minor release version difference, so probably not important to have updated there. But I did that on purpose because I wanted to show how so many of the development tools are already configured in this environment for you by choosing which items we wanted in our workspace. There's a pre-built template from SAP. But you're not locked into that. I was able to install my own custom tool that wasn't part of the workspace, and I was able to update one of the tools. So you don't have to wait for SAP to rebuild these templates of the dev spaces, if you will. You have full control over the environment yourself. On the other hand, if you don't want to mess with it, SAP does keep it well up to date and well stocked with tools. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. If you don't want to mess with it, SAP is taking care of most of it for you. If you do want like the bleeding edge latest version that hasn't been updated in the major template yet, you can go ahead and access that or add other tools to the environment as well. So that's very nice that you have that choice. All right, so our environment's set up, we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and create a project, and we're going to let the CDS command line do most of the work for us. So first of all, if you remember, yeah, there's a project subdirectory here, so we're going to go into it, and it should be, yes, it is empty. And from here, we'll do the CDS init command. But I'm going to first do a CDS help on init that tells us some of the options that we have here. Just go ahead and if I can grab it, make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we are. So what we can say here is we want to say CDS init, and we'll give it our project name. Well, let's go ahead and name it the same here, HANA Open SAP Cloud, and maybe I'll leave the year off the end just to keep it from being so long. And then we want to tell it what features we want to add to this. So we want to say add. We don't want Java because we're going to use JavaScript, no JS development, and that's the default option. We are going to use HANA. We do want this to be a multi-target application, and we want an MTA YAML. And we'll go ahead and set up a pipeline for CI/CD integration. Did a video, it's probably been 2 months ago on that topic. So if you want to refer back to that, but we'll go ahead and put that option in so we have that capability as well. Well, let's go ahead and hit enter, and that did create the folder for us. And in fact, I could CD into it, but let's go ahead and pull it up here in the workspace. This is what we're going to be working in full time. So we'll just go ahead and bring it in here so we can browse it visually. And reopen my terminal. Now everything is relative to the start of the project, and we can see what all got generated for us. We of course have our basic application structure, app where our UI will eventually go, DB where our database level artifacts and our data model will be defined, and SRV where our service layer, our Node.js and OData services, RESTful services, all that will go in here. Now, right now, all of this is pretty empty. Our database module has an HDI config, and that's about it. It did generate the main things here. We've got our Jenkins file and our pipeline config. That was all because we chose that pipeline option for CI/CD integration. We're not going to use that right now. Maybe in a much later video series we can revisit that topic. But like I said, I've done a little bit on that in the past. For now, we're just going to build and test locally, so I don't quite need that yet. Did define our MTA YAML. If you've done HANA native development, going all the way back to XSA on-premise, back to HANA 1.0, the MTA YAML really describes the entire project, all the modules in your application, all the microservices, all the resources. This is no different now with CAP generating it for us. Basically, for each of these, it's built the structure here and also set up a resource for our HANA as well. And we don't need the HANA trial, even though we're on a trial landscape. You don't want to change this to HANA trial because that would actually point you to the older HANA as a service trial. With the newer HANA Cloud trial, you just continue with the service plan HANA as you would in a productive environment as well. And as long as you've already initialized and have your HANA Cloud instance running, it will work fine. It will automatically find it and connect you up to it. So this is pretty good to go. Now the other thing that we have here is we do have our package.json. We're going to want to make a couple of changes here actually. And I'll tell you why. First and foremost, in the CDS section, I do want to make a change here. Very important one. So I'm going to come here and above the requires section, I'm going to add another section called HANA. And actually, I just need this deploy format. Now, this is new syntax for the for Cloud Application Programming Model that will tell it to target HDB table instead of HDB CDS when it builds your data model. When you actually do the CDS build and it produces the deployment specific artifacts. And that's important because the HANA Cloud trial no longer supports HDB CDS. It only supports HDB table, HDB view. So we want to use the new CAP CDS, and we want that to generate directly to HDB table, HDB view, and that's exactly what this deploy format will do for us. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I actually want to grab. Sometimes I'm going to be looking over here. I'm going to grab some code off my other screen, so I'm not always typing everything from scratch. But I want to come here to my database module, and I want to go ahead and in the root of my database module, I want to show you something here. how the default works. So let's go ahead and just create something called schema.cds, and bare bones, single entity, one attribute, integer, key, nothing special, just so we can begin a little bit of development work, and I can explain a couple things to you. All right, so now from the root of the project, which we are in the root, I'm going to go ahead and do an npm install here, which will install locally the CDS runtime and Express and the HANA client. So let's go ahead and do that. Give that a minute to bring all the packages down. Okay, oh good. And actually, now, so npx is a command that would allow you to run a module without having installed it locally. We're going to do this so much, it makes sense to go ahead and install them locally, which I did, and now I can change this to npm. But before we do this, we have this one schema CDS. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead from the root and do a CDS build. And you see what that does? It compiles to the output. And what it does, by default now, CDS writes everything into a gen folder. So if we look here, it allows your root folders to be really the sources, and then the output of everything is a gen folder, and then it duplicates the DB and SRV, and you see what it did here. It did a nice job, because it did, it put in a manifest, it loaded a package.json for us, so we're ready to work within these subfolders. We could now, run the HDI deploy from the DB subfolder, and it copied the output here in source gen. We see that it created an HDB table. So that's really nice that it did all that for us. We want the build. Now the part that I personally don't like, and this is a matter of personal preference to some extent, but also because I know I'm going to go back to the Web IDE full stack, because I can only do calculation view development there. So I need to maintain some backwards compatibility here, and the Web IDE still expects this to work a little differently, to basically deploy the gens into the target folders. And personally, I still kind of prefer that way of development. So let me show you what we can do here to change that. In this package.json, we can configure all this about the way that CDS works. That's one of the nice things here about CDS. It's opinionated, but it's not like you're locked into all the decisions that SAP has made for you. So what I want to do is I want to add a build section. And I'm just going to come here to under CDS before HANA. I'm going to add a build section. And actually, I have more than what I need, because this is stuff that we'll add later. So I'm taking this from the finished product. But what we're saying here is now we're telling it build. We want to override the target, basically this gen folder, and instead of putting gen in the root and duplicating the subfolders, what I want it to do is go into the original source folders and intermix the generated objects with it. Okay, so with this change, I think the best thing to do here is we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll just see the difference in what it does. So I'm going to run the CDS build again, and what you'll see this time is now it wrote the content not into this gen at the root, but it wrote it into the DB folder here. So we got DB source gen. And what that does is it leaves what's already in there alone, and then so what you see is if we look in server gen, we only have this CSN. So it did a little less for us, because if we look here in the original gen SRV, we do have a manifest. We've got a package.json, um, and things like that, where it copied locally. That's okay. It might mean we have to do a couple of things to accommodate for that. Now, one thing I wanted to do here is it did put a package.json here. Now, what you could do is you could either run this against the default and then copy the package JSON and the HDI config and stuff like that into your DB folder. But the other thing that we could do here is the hana-cli tool will also initialize a DB folder for you as well. So yeah, I'm here at the root. And if I say hana-cli help, and if I remember which command this was, yeah, the create module. So I can come here and I can just say hana-cli create module. And yes, I am building for HANA Cloud. And now what it does is, it updated this DB folder, and it added a package JSON to it with configuration that's ready to go to run the HDI deployer, and it added this older build.js as well. This is also nice. This gives us backwards compatibility to the Web IDE as well. So that's the main reason I did this. So now we can go ahead and get rid of this gen folder. We don't need it anymore, and we'll be able to work directly out of this out of the DB folder. Now, what this does do is it means we're not going to be able to do a CDS deploy to, because it expects the defaults, at least not without passing other things in. But I tend not to personally use that. Anyway, I like having a little bit more control. This is all about, how much do you want to let the tooling do for you? How much do you want to do yourself? I like having a little bit more control and just calling a deploy directly here using npm start, which will run the deployer for me, which is really all that CDS deploy to HANA was doing anyway. It was creating the service instance for you, but then it was calling the same deploy command. So now we need to make just one other minor change, and that's to the MTA YAML that was generated for us. It, of course, assumed the default location and settings for the build targets. So we need to make a little change here to remove the gen folder. So it points right into SRV and DB. And we'll save that, and we'll be good. Now, let's go ahead and create our HDI container. And to do this, once again, like I said, you could use the CDS deploy to, and it will create the container instance for you. But of course, that is kind of set up to use the default folder structure, and I didn't want to do that. I also know later I'm going to be adding a second HDI container in my project, and that didn't work so well. So I want full control here. I also think this is a great opportunity to really explain to you behind the scenes everything that command and that tool is doing. It can all be done manually as well and give you full control. I'm a little bit of a control freak. I kind of like that anyway. So what we want to do is, going back to our MTA YAML, because I didn't need to close it there, so I want to create an instance of this resource. And this is different from the Web IDE. This is one of the major differences. In the Web IDE, I would, right mouse click on the DB folder and I would say build, and the Web IDE would start the process of looking at the MTA YAML, and it would pre-build, pre-allocate all the resources for you, bind them to the services, and then start or run those services. Now, it doesn't do that in the Business Application Studio, at least not yet. No problem, though, because we can do the same thing that the Web IDE was doing manually. And once again, I kind of like doing it myself anyway, because that gives me full control over things. So what we want to do is, I'll first come here and I'll just do a CF services. And we'll see what services we already have out there. Once again, just the HANA instance itself, and I also have an ABAP trial instance. So what I want to do is I want to first do a CF create service. It is a HANA service that I want to create, and the plan is HDI shared. And then there's the name of the resource that I want to use, hana-opensap-cloud-2020. And we'll go ahead and let that start the creation process. And what it does is it's not actually done yet. So it says create in progress. It's happening asynchronously. It released the command back to us though. And what we need to do is we can do CF services, and we can check on the status here. And you'll see it is create in progress. Now we don't want to go on to the next step until this is done, because it would fail. We want to create keys, and we want to deploy to this container. So we'll give it just a minute to work. And what we can do is we can keep checking back here with CF services until it's done. Still create in progress, so we'll give it a second. And there we are. It is changed to created succeeded. That way we know it's done. And actually our HDI container instance and technical users and things like that have been created. Even our schema inside the HANA database is there now. It's ready for us to deploy artifacts into it. So in order to do that, let me create a service key. And this is a way for us to generate credentials to connect to the container through the service manager. And that's important because we're going to use that to connect to it here from the deployer and the command line tool. So I'll say CF create service key. Give it the name of the service instance, and then what do I want the key name to be? I'm just going to call it default. You can call it whatever you want. Just remember what you call it. And this doesn't take very long. This just takes a second. There we are. It's done. Now what I can do, let's see, what folder am I in? I want to go ahead and go into, actually I'm going to start here in the root folder. And I'm going to go ahead and say HANA CLI. And I'm going to say service key. Give it the service instance and the key. And what this is going to do, yes, I want to encrypt. Yes, I want to validate the certificate. And yes, I'm running the Cloud Foundry runtime. So what this just did is it went out and connected to that service instance of the HDI service that I created, pulled all the credentials out of it and all the connection parameters and wrote them into this default env file. Now the default env is what CAP and the HDI deployer and most all the other standard SAP Node.js modules use to do local testing or local deployment. It allows it to simulate the service bindings that would happen if we were actually deploying to Cloud Foundry. And this is very nice because this is going to allow us to do all of our testing and debugging here in the Business Application Studio without actually having to deploy anything to Cloud Foundry. So we get much faster turnaround times, but yet we get an accurate representation, as you'll see later, of the security and all the aspects. And we can simulate really all of that. Anything we can do with the Cloud Foundry environment or Kubernetes secrets, we can simulate here with the default env JSON. You might know this from doing local development in VS Code. The same thing works here. And the only thing we're going to want to do is we're going to copy this default env JSON because we're going to be working in the individual folders now. You know, it's good to have it at the root, that's fine, but we really want it in the DB folder and the SRV folder. I don't like to type a lot of things, so what I did here, I like to go to my root package.json. Go to my root package.json, and you can add extra scripts here. And I'm just going to add a script here that is called env that's going to copy the default env JSON from the root into my DB folder and into my SRV folder. So that every time if I would change it, I can, with one command, well, if I save that, one command here in the root, I can say npm run env. Oh no, npm start env. what did I do wrong there? Maybe I had that right to begin with. Now, why did that do an npm cds run? I am in the root, yeah, npm. Oh, because that was routing to my start command. Yeah. npm v, that doesn't, because I want to do a command. Yeah, npm run env. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Sorry. I got a little lost in command line commands there. So it's npm run, and then the name of the script. So unlike the start script where you can just say npm start and it will run automatically, we need to tell it to run the script, and we want it to run our env script, and then it copied that default env into each of our folders, which we'll need a little bit later. So now when I go into the db folder, and I can say hana-cli status, for instance, and it connects to the HANA database, we can see that we're connected. We can see the user we're connected with. Various details there. Actually, I want to do a hana-cli system info. Yeah, there I know I'm connected to HANA Cloud because it's version 4 of HANA. And what we can do now is we're basically ready. Remember, we did the CDS build already, which took this tiny little schema CDS with one entity. It did compile it to our base HDB table, and we can go ahead and deploy this into the database now. Actually, I'm in the DB folder, and remember, we got our package.json in the DB folder, which is going to run the HDI deployer. So from the DB folder, if I run, first I got to run it just one time. I got to run an npm install in the DB folder, and that will bring down the HDI deployer itself from npm. So we'll give that a second. There we are. That's done. And actually, my post install script, it was my build.js, and I got something. I have something a little wrong in there, don't I? Looks like. Script build. Oh, because there's not a build in my package.json. This is once again for backwards compatibility with the web IDE, and that's not actually. I did get an error message. That's not a problem, but if I want to totally emulate the web IDE, which I do down the road, is I should probably go ahead and add this build in here. And that's just to do a clean build of CDS completely from the root. Let me go ahead and run that install again, just to show you that. Oh, and I still. Did not like the. Build all clean. Why did it not like the build all clean? Oh, that's my bad. I don't need that on the front. Let's try this one more time. There we are. Now, that was unnecessary in this environment because I had already manually ran a CDS build, but when you're running from the web IDE and you do that build command, it's running a bunch of things automatically for you. It's executing these scripts. Now we have an environment that and the extra scripts that we don't technically need from the Business Application Studio, but we have a structure that is now compatible with the Web IDE. If I would switch back over to the Web IDE, which I will at some point to do calculation view development, my project doesn't break. I can still build from there. I can still do my CDS build from there as well. So just did all that for backwards compatibility. But now what I can do from the DB command, from the DB folder, is I can go ahead and do npm start. And what it's doing is the same thing that would happen if I right mouse clicked on the DB folder in the Web IDE instead of build. It just deployed into the HANA database, connected to my container that I built, that I created previously from the command line, and it deployed this base.hdb table. And just to prove to you, CLI, CLI open DBX for the Database Explorer. And we'll go ahead and open the Database Explorer for my HANA Cloud instance. Actually, I don't need to go into that one right now. And we'll go ahead and add a new HDI container. And I got a lot of stuff out here. There's our HANA OpenSAP DB. And let's go ahead and add it to the view. There we are. And if we go ahead and look at the tables, we should have one table. Yes, there's our base table. No data in it. Nothing exciting yet. We haven't actually started doing the data modeling for this project. This is all just the setup of the environment. But we know we're good to develop now. I can write CDS files. I can compile them in a format that will work on HANA Cloud Trial specifically. In this case, I have a project structure that's backwards compatible with the Web IDE, and I can very easily, now from the command line, anytime that I change anything, I can redeploy. Let's just do that real quick. Let's just come here. Let's just add a second column here. Okay. I don't have to go through all these steps again. I'm here in the DB folder. Just go back one. Let's just do a CDS build. That's going to recompile it. And now in our DB folder, npm start. And that's going to redeploy it to HANA. So it just rebuilt the table in HANA. And if I come back over to the Database Explorer and I refresh and look at this table. Okay, that's interesting. Are. Just a little funny business in the UI here, but now we see our new column has been added to our table. So it was a little bit of a process to get set up, but once you're set up, very fast with making changes, building them, and being able to see them reflected in HANA directly right away. So we're in pretty good shape now. We got our development environment, our project set up. We know we can deploy to HANA. Last thing we want to do for this first in the series is make sure that everything is persisted well as far as our project. That means pushing it to a Git repository. That's going to give us a backup persistence beyond just our local workspace in the Business Application Studio, but it's also going to allow us to easily move from Business Application Studio to Web IDE to maybe local development using VS Code without having to copy files around or something like that. Also would allow multiple developers to work on the project at the same time. So what I want to do, I named this HANA OpenSAP Cloud. So I'm going to go over here to my to GitHub, my personal area, and I'm just going to actually I'm going to say create a new repository, and what did I name it? HANA OpenSAP Cloud. HANA OpenSAP Cloud. On SAP Devs. Cap. Example. go ahead and make this private. And well, this is just for me to persist it for myself, so I'm not gonna add too much here. Let's go ahead and create the repository. Yep, we're done here. And what we want to do is we want to actually, we can go ahead and add a lot of these commands. So let's see here. Can I? Let's see if I can get this side by side here. Actually, I want to go back up a level. There we are. Do my get init, and then yeah. Do I already have a read? I already have a README, so I don't need to add a README. Sure, we'll do our. And it wants to know who I am, which makes sense. Get config global. Config global. And I didn't do that last one right, did I? Oh, that's okay. User.email. There we are. Config global user.name. Thomas. There we are. And now let's try that commit again. There we are. And then we can set our remote, just like it tells us to do. There we are. And then we can go ahead and do a push. Do I not have a... Yeah. I should have that wise. So commit. Oh, because I have extra files here. Let me see if I can... go ahead and select all the files. Initial. Okay. So there we are. Now we'll redo our push. Yes, it wants my username as it should. And it wants my password. And now it's committing it all to Git. And if we come back here and look, we should see, yes, all of our content now moved over to Git. Of course, it does not move empty folders, so we don't have, or we're not tracking those yet. And of course, it does not have the node modules. We don't want it to. We have a git ignore that would avoid that. But now we have our project tracked and available in Git. Sorry, it was a little bumpy there. I generally create an empty project in Git, pull it in, and then do my CDS init into it. I wanted to do a little different flow than what I'm used to, because I wanted to do the Git portion of the demo here at the end. So different ways to do different things. Threw me off just a little bit there with one of the commands, but in the end we got it over there. It's all looking good, and hopefully you've seen that a little bit on the getting started here. Like I said, we haven't really built much yet, but our environment is all set up. We've got it good connected to our HANA Cloud. We've got it connected to Git. We're ready to start working. In the next episode, we'll start building our data model and really start getting into the guts of using Cloud Application Programming Model to design our database artifacts. So join me here again for the next episode when we'll go and start building at that next level inside the DB module and really build out our data model.